Hello and welcome to this webinar on embracing Microsoft 365 at the Fallibroome Trust. So just to introduce everybody who's taken part today. So we've got myself and Darren and Lloyd from Cloud Design Box. Hi Darren.
Hi Tony.
And Lloyd. And we've got Stuart Carvell. He's the assistant head at Eaton Bank Academy. Hi Stuart.
Hi, how's it going, Tony?
Yeah, good, thank you. So what we'll do just to get started is we'll tell you a bit about ourselves, so what Cloud Design Box do, and then we'll introduce Stuart and ask him a few questions about his approach, or the trust approach at getting good user adoption across the trust with Microsoft 365. Darren's then going to take us through some of the benefits of adoption, and we'll bring Stuart back in and ask for some real life examples of that as well. And then we'll go through a quick demo of Teams and some of the real world advantages, and any questions and answers. Any questions we'll read out at the end. Feel free to post questions at any point. So there is a question panel in your top right, and you can ask questions at any point throughout. We'll try and ask them as we go along, but if not, we'll save them to the end. So just a bit about Cloud Design Box before we start. So we're a team of education teams and SharePoint experts. We support over 220 schools in the UK and abroad. And just if you're not familiar with what we do, we enhance Office 365 for education. So we can automate class teams from your school management system. We can also create centralized resource areas. So teachers can save time by having that one version of the truth that they can reuse year on year, each academic year, with all of their class teams. We've also got other features as well that can add extra value, such as student folders inside Teams. You can track staff usage in terms of analytics, lots of other features in our SharePoint intranet, so you can create that collaboration and communication space for the whole school. We've got other features that we're always adding on as well, so class cover, site creation, and we do try and focus on user adoption, so getting everybody in the school using it really well. So in terms of user adoption, we do things like training needs analysis, training sessions, either online webinars or workshops. We've also got a CPD self-service portal as well, just so you get really good usage across the whole school or trust. So I'm going to introduce Stuart. So Stuart is the assistant head at Eaton Bank, one of the schools we work with, and we thought it'd be really useful just to have a chat with him about how the trust have adopted it, what their strategy has been, what the successes have been, and also, what the challenges have been over the last year or so. Obviously, we've had a pandemic in the middle of it as well, so that's probably changed their approach. So hello, Stuart, and thanks for joining us today. And I think Darren's got some questions to ask you.
Yeah, hi Stuart, you're right.
Hi, Darren.
So when you were looking at implementing Office 365 and all those different services for Fallibroome, what was the approach that the trust took to that?
We've obviously a group of schools. There's 10 schools across the Fallibroome Trust, and we've obviously existed before there was a trust in some ways, so that lots of the sort of decisions that have been made could be historic decisions. And what I mean by that is that schools across the trust traditionally have been a Microsoft school in the past, and that's the way that the trust has sort of grown. There are schools that aren't Microsoft schools. We've got Google schools as well, but the predominant sort of direction when you take the group together, that we are a Microsoft based school and trust. The decision to move over to sort of Office 365 is a real easy one. Obviously, as schools progress and as you start to work together and as a trust grows, then the need to be able to collaborate, work together, share things becomes just an increasing part of what you're doing. And that's why you move towards Office 365. That's why we went that way. And from my own sort of school, as far as from Eaton Bank Academy, why did we do it? It was just a natural process that we went through, being a sort of a Microsoft school, evolving into this idea that as things become cloud-based and as we can sort of spread our ability for the students and the staff to access the different packages in Microsoft, then moving over just became a very obvious decision to make.
Yeah, I suppose part of that challenge was getting your staff on board, doing user adoption with the staff, training with the staff. What kind of strategies did you use to get your staff feeling confident about 365 and sharing?
What we did as a starting point is, and I think any time where you launch something new, and I'll talk a bit about Eaton Bank at this moment in time, is it's good to have people who are confident, and it's good to have the early adopters really, who then, when somebody like myself comes out and says, right, this is the direction that we're going in, it's good to have people spread out across the school or the trust that can effectively say, yeah, I'm on this journey already, and actually it's really beneficial. So that's one of the key things that we've tried to work out, both as a trust and as Eaton Bank as a school. So what we did initially was we sort of, I guess, just played in the background, really, created a team and said, right, let's start sharing what we know. So within Eaton Bank, what that meant was that we had a team called the Microsoft team, and effectively we just messed around in the Microsoft products, and effectively we're like, oh, do you know when you do this in Teams that happens? Oh, do you know you can share a document this way? Oh, do you know this is how SharePoint happened? And all these sorts of things started to happen purely amongst a group of probably about 12 to 15 of us. And that 12 to 15 was from a range of different people across the school. So it was really important from my perspective that included people who were at the sort of computer science end of teaching within a secondary school, down to the people who were like, I'm just nervous about the sort of computer side of things and using IT. And therefore what it meant is when we went out broader than just that group, people were really into it and really ready to go. And then across the trust, a very similar pattern as well. In the first sort of phases of lockdown, we met and brought our primary colleagues together in with the secondary colleagues and said, right, what have you been learning? And effectively what we did was, it wasn't competitive, but almost like a race to the top, where it was like, oh, we've learned this, and therefore everybody else across the schools learned it. And then, oh, we've been doing this in our school. And we effectively just built and built and built until eventually you were in a situation where the schools were just forging ahead, but we were forging together as a group.
Stuart, I was just going to ask a quick question. How do you put together that group? Was it voluntary? Was there incentives? How did you get people to sign up and buy into that group?
At Eaton Bank, we're super lucky in the sense of like the staff are really willing to take stuff on. So it was very much a case of just, does anybody want to be involved? And initially when you first start teams, then it was probably one of the first messages that went out, just sort of saying who wants to be involved. So it was completely a voluntary group. Across the trust, what you've got is there's people like myself who are in roles within each school that then came together. So it wasn't sort of like the option to join the trust development. It was a case of that we were each in roles. So members of staff from Winsford, members across from Fallibroome, from sort of the primary groups as well. We all came together as a group based on our roles, really, and that's how that was decided.
Great. So one of the things that sometimes can potentially cause a challenge or some concern is the fact that it might take a bit of a time to get used to these things, and teachers are very, very busy. But is there something that you can say now to kind of defeat that argument a little bit, or to persuade people in terms of the amount of time that you will save as a teacher? Is that something that's demonstratable?
Is it demonstratable? That's a difficult one. What I would say is, and I always go back to this, is that we have habits as human beings, and we all know the habits that we have. And the reason why we have those habits is because they become a bit of a shortcut to allowing us to work without really having to think about what we're doing. I think we can all reflect and say the habits that we have, whether it's going home and instantly going into like the biscuit jar, or whether it's eating certain things or drinking certain things or whatever, they're not always the best thing for us. And what we very much have said is that it will take some time and some effort in order to take these new things on, but ultimately the end point is worth the time and the effort. So effectively what we've said is, look, we know that you're used to having like a file where you work on your own in your own sort of drive, and that file is what you're working on, a Word document, for example, and you're used to then sending it via email to somebody else, and then they change it a bit, and then you come back and you end it with multiple ones, and we're used to that. That's what we're comfortable with. That's our habitual way of working. But if you work in teams, you'll be able to collaborate on it, you can all edit at the same time. We can effectively have 12 people making a document at the same time. That will save you a considerable amount of time, and therefore quite an easy sell to the staff that you do have to think in some ways long term. But with all the people who were involved in the pre sort of working all this out, there was enough noise in the background to say, yeah, they're actually telling the truth. This isn't just one person saying we should do this. It was like, yeah, we've been having a go at that, and actually I'm making PowerPoints far quicker than I was before. Or when I don't know how to use an Excel file, I can get support and we can talk to each other about it. So it was I guess a changing habits was the strategy.
That's great. What about the student experience? Do you find your students are becoming or have to become perhaps more independent, more autonomous in order to use this kind of approach?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I've been sort of debating that one in my head for a while, as far as, are our students more independent? And my honest answer would be yes, but could I evidence that? I'm not sure. I could evidence it in the sense of we've used things like Microsoft Forms in order to say, how easy are you finding this part of remote learning? How easy are you able to access work, like all the different skills that you need, hand in work, know what you're doing day to day, manage your calendar? And the students have said that that's been a real positive experience for them. So I could definitely say in a remote learning, if we were to say 2 years ago, could our students literally manage their own time, literally not come to school but still receive an education and organise their education? 2 years ago we would have said no. So therefore it does make sense that the students are far more independent than what they maybe were a year or two ago. My only reason why I have hesitance in that is we feel like we've got a long way to go with our strategy, and I'm not sure that their independence at the moment is more independence purely in the domain specific world of remote learning. I'm not sure we could honestly say, are the students now independent in their approach to more of education?
And I guess that would depend as well on how you now change your classroom practice to take advantage of all the things that the students have learned. Previously you might have done a lot of kind of spoon feeding in some cases, step-by-step activities, holding the students' hands through things, whereas now that they can go off and work on something in their own time and then just come back to the teacher and get help if they need it. So that may, I suppose, come back into the classroom as well. Yeah,
there's definitely a case of I think most of us in education would never have thought of videoing ourselves very much in the past, whereas now it seemed like having a snippet of information which students... One second for a bell. It's just the changeover bell.
There we are.
Yeah, the students definitely in the past that they wouldn't have gone and looked at that sort of information, and what we're now starting to do is build libraries and information, and there's been lots of sort of platforms and things that have been able to do that in the past for us. But across the trust, I think we would all say that, and I know the primary colleagues would definitely say the same, that having something that has got a familiar face on it and a familiar logo and is there created by your teacher has a lot more impact and draws the students in more. So we will see that coming in the future, I think, and the things that we've learned through lockdown and through the sort of remote learning sort of hopefully era that's coming towards an end will definitely feed into our future. And the idea that we've all been doing as far as definitely in the secondary schools, Winsford and ourselves, trying to build libraries that will last us as long as we need them to, rather than it being a snippet in time that we built the library for, will definitely have an impact in the future.
Right, so that idea of long-term resources, whether they're, I guess, Word documents or videos, that will save you time. And
yeah.
With the blended learning now, you may have some students who have to go home for a bit and some students who are still in the classroom. Would you imagine yourself, and perhaps even thinking about this kind of next year, would you ever imagine yourself playing a video of yourself that you made this year next year as part of your normal lesson when you've got 30 odd kids in the class again, or playing a video from one of your colleagues in the same subject and just saying, yeah, this is something we made last year, and literally just playing it and not feeling embarrassed to do that?
I think we've all had to go through that journey of being seen on a camera. I hope this time next year I'll have slightly shorter hair and I will have had the haircut that the release from lockdown will have allowed me to have. No, I'm already thinking ahead as far as I teach a BTEC sport class, a year 12 class, and a blended approach will be something that I'll want to bring into my teaching with them next year as they roll into year 13. I know that across the trust, the idea of giving the students more opportunities to learn, and that lessons don't finish at the end of the bell effectively, and that they have the option to go out and continue that learning from a SharePoint site or a different site is something that definitely will be happening across the trust.
Great. You've already mentioned this in passing. You talked about using a form to gauge student satisfaction, if you like, how happy are students. How do you measure the success of adoption for teachers and for students? Is it, surveys? Did you just ask people?
I guess it comes from a few places, and it's hard to say that one thing at the moment can give you the metric and can give you the answer to the question. So there's a few things that we've been using. The first one is obviously when we have had remote learning, and I like to think that our strategies have not just been about remote learning. Our strategies are long term, that they hopefully go on beyond that point. But we obviously, knowing that our attendance across the trust was really, really high, really successful attendance rates, meant that we knew that the students were adopting and were part of it. We also sort of asked our students using Microsoft Forms, we said, come on, tell us what you think, how good are we doing here? And the staff found that a real sort of motivating thing to hear. We've had some lovely comments right across the trust from parents saying, look, what you're doing is phenomenal, and in the environment that you're doing it in is just amazing. Our students across the trust, we had a 5-star scale using one of the Microsoft Form questions, and they gave us just over 4 stars for what we were doing. And although a competitive person like me wants us to push even on and be further, like to say that a year ago we were not in a situation that we could run this across the trust, and we run it, and the students are so thankful for it and really think it's such a high quality. Across the primary schools, they scored even higher than the secondary schools, and again that shows the support that the secondary schools gave down to the primary schools, and that working together approach that we've had. So we would say that I guess, how else do I measure it? One of the geeky things that I've been doing in order to sort of keep an eye on what's going on, and I don't know if everyone has access to this, but it's one of the things you should definitely sort of have a look at, is in the Microsoft Admin Center you can get a productivity score for your organization effectively, and it's a Microsoft score that gives you some ideas about, against the Microsoft metrics, how your organization is doing. And it looks at things like how long are meetings, how often are people working together, how much collaboration is going on, which sort of sites you're using, how are you communicating. And to me, we're only able to do that at the moment in the trust at like a school level, because we don't have a shared tenant that allows us to pull the trust all together, or a single tenant. But what that's allowed us to look at Eaton Bank is we've effectively doubled our score on the productivity score, and what that means is that the staff are collaborating, communicating in effective ways, meetings are being organized in a way that means that they're limited in time, but people sharing screens and whatever. And that again gives me an idea that staff are comfortable in what they're doing, and it's being done in the right way as well.
Stuart, an interesting question we get quite often is, how do you train the students? And I know a lot of people have plans in terms of getting staff on board, but what training and support do the students need to access the systems?
That's all been done at school level. So across the trust, we've not had a one method of doing it. What we did initially at a number of the schools was we went and did sort of like a parents' evening and said, this is how you log on to Teams. And the different schools went away. We did that as a primary group and as some of the secondary schools, and said, this is how you log on to Teams. And we taught the parents and we taught the students at that moment in time. We've also, in our computer science lessons and our computer lessons, they've had a focus at Eaton Bank specifically of, here's how you work this system, here's how you do these things. And that's been really important as well, as far as getting the students involved that way. Then what we've done is we've made simple videos and we've put them on our school website and said, this is how you get on, or here's the method of doing it. and each school has done that in I guess in its own way rather than a trust approach. And that's how we've upskilled the students. So a range of different things. Number one, upskilling parents. Number two, upskilling the students in lesson time, but then also providing options for them to just sort of find their way in. We also gave, and there's been a move across the 2 secondary schools and a large number of the primary schools as well. We made Microsoft Teams and the assignments, that's our homework policy now for a number of the schools, and therefore it means that the students are constantly being refreshed and being in Teams. It's not like something that we have to pick up for remote learning or for a hybrid type lesson. They're used to being in there every day because their homework is in there.
Great. So Stuart, building on everything you've done, and it sounds like it's gone really well, what are your plans moving forwards to develop the digital strategy further?
The plan has always been, and I'd say this from an Eaton Bank perspective, but also from a Fallibroome Trust perspective, the plan has always been to reach the point where we can get the most out of the technology, and that it isn't just a remote learning plan. What we're looking at now is the infrastructure across the trust and how we can change the infrastructure in order to support our movement towards a single active directory, as in we want to be a trust where we can communicate with each other directly. We're looking at communication. We're trying to consider how we can reduce the need for emails. We want to be able to communicate in the trust and feel like we are communicating with each other rather than having to leave almost our teams and go out external into Outlook in order to email each other. We're also looking at how do we continue to develop the staff's confidence. That's one of the key steps that we're going towards next, is we're trying to almost come up with a digital literacy, almost like a lower level really, of like, let's try and pull everybody up towards ideas that can save them time. So we've been talking as a trust recently and saying, what little skills could we give all our staff that would save them time and therefore reduce their workload? So we're looking at putting together some like 1 minute, 2 minute videos that tries to save somebody 5 minutes and therefore upskill them. And then the final part of the strategy is very simple, which is how do we support the wider community in having the access that they need in order to be successful in remote learning. And by that, what I mean is looking at whether there's loan schemes or some sort of laptop scheme or something where we can make sure that people have got the devices that they need, and that's at a parental and at a student level. Yeah. So the plan is to try and pull things together, to work together as much as we can, but to try and support as much as we can around it.
That's great. Thank you, Stuart. So what we're going to do now, we'll take a moment to focus on some of the benefits for teachers and students. But if you stay with me and chip in as we go through these. So in terms of teachers, the main thing, and we've already talked about this, is saving teacher time. The idea that you can centralize your resources. So instead of every teacher having their own kind of silo in their My Documents or their OneDrive or on a USB stick somewhere, all the teachers share their resources. And what that means in theory is if you've got 3 people in the department, each of them claim responsibility up front for creating a third of the content that needs to be created for the upcoming term, and then each person is basically only doing a third of the work, rather than them having to do all the work themselves, you know, on a Sunday morning instead of sharing. How did you find sharing resources between teachers worked? Was it something that your colleagues were comfortable doing right away, or were they worried about, you know, I'm not sure I want to show my PowerPoints, what if other people have better PowerPoints than me? What was their kind of view going into this?
I think because at the moment us being our tenants are school by school based, there's probably been less apprehension to sharing. I think as you start to go out and you start to share across the trust, then people will find that more challenging in some ways, because you do feel like almost like an external person is going to be looking at your resources. What people have found though is that definitely within Eaton Bank is that the chance to share has been really, really useful. Some faculties and departments within Eaton Bank have been sort of a long way into that process already. and they found it a real just simple movement. Things get moved from one place over to the other, and now it can be accessed at any time in any place, and they like that ability of Office 365. Others where we have been much more sort of focused in the idea of that their work has been their work and more protective of their work and don't want to share it as much, have found it challenging. And I guess that comes back to, again, the idea of that once you have the critical mass moving in a critical direction, then people start to just go with it. Okay,
yeah,
and it is a case of making that critical mass and having enough people in order to say, look, this is the direction we're going on. Here are all the people who are enjoying it and liking it, and therefore come and join us. And that's the easy way to get through it, I'd say.
Thinking about the challenge of doing it across the trust, I guess one way that you could do that is, rather than saying, oh, we're going to share everything, which is a bit scary, you could just create a centralized area where perhaps exemplar work and exemplar lessons could be put. So if somebody is really pleased that they've done the lesson, they think, oh, this is a good one, this is my Bart Simpson lesson, as we used to call it, you know, then I'll put that up there and everybody can see how good I am. And just the fact that you're only sharing the stuff that you think is really good. And then, of course, other people from different schools will pick up those resources. They'll take them away and use them, or they'll be inspired by them. That might be kind of a gentle introduction to doing it across schools as well.
Yeah, the reality is that although I guess in IT and in the digital environment we're not linked, as a trust in the schools, we are definitely linked. And there's lots of support groups within, like the PE groups effectively meet together, and drama will meet together, and geography staff will meet together, and therefore the resources are being shared. They're just not held centrally, and that's our next steps effectively.
Yeah, great. So some of the other things you can do, of course, is raise standards. When you're centralizing resources, that naturally helps to drive up the quality, because it's the Wikonomics thing, right? You know, if you've got multiple people working on something, then everybody kind of refines it a little bit, and the product you end up with is just a better end result. Also, of course, you know, senior leaders, heads of department, they get some confidence that the resources that are being used for teaching and learning are the ones that they can see in those centralized places. So that's also an opportunity for them to influence the quality or the format of those resources. From a student management point of view, of course, if you've got things like classes, class teams, there's a lot of control that you now have over what happens in the classroom. You can choose, for example, to mute students if they're being a bit silly. You don't get to do that in a real classroom. So there are some advantages. And we also, Tony, I know you and I like to talk about the invisible child quite a bit, because it's a lovely idea, is that, you know, you've got students who get to talk a lot in class because they're confident and they know the answer, and, you know, they put their hands up. Hermione Granger, you know. Whereas you've got a lot of students in the middle that are just kind of quiet, and maybe they don't want to talk in front of other students. They've got ideas, they know the answers, but they don't want to put their hands up. They don't want to stick their head above the parapet. Whereas if you have those conversations in a class team, in kind of a discussion board there, quite often what we've seen is that those students will suddenly find a voice. They'll feel confident that they can contribute to those lessons. And also they can sit there and they can go, right, I've typed in my sentence, or shall I send this? I don't know. Let me just change this word. Yeah, that's okay. And then they click go. And that gives those students the confidence to collaborate in a way they otherwise might not. And of course, that's also great evidence then, because as a teacher, you can go back through those conversations and you can see that, you know, certain students have been engaged. Did you find, Stuart, that your teachers were doing a lot of that kind of thing, or was it mainly kind of teachers putting announcements in the classes?
I think because of the way that we rolled out and we did it at such speed, I think the teachers were much more in control of the classes. But I would definitely say, again, speaking Eaton Bank specific, I would say that there's a number of students who have just loved the idea of being in the team. And what I would say by that is, you have that typical thing at about 8 o'clock in the morning where you know that the students don't quite know whether they need their football boots today or not. And somebody posts it, 6 people reply, you get 7 smiley faces and whatever, and you know the kids are going to turn up with whether they need their football boots or not, and it's all sorted. And there's a nice sort of element to that it allows the students and gives them a safe place almost to have those communications, and also where the staff are. So if somebody doesn't respond, the staff can obviously get back and say, don't forget at so and so you need this, and therefore there's been that element of what's going on. We found it at Eaton Bank, I guess, the students have found being, I don't know, posting and all the different things. They found that a challenge initially because it's something that they've not been used to prior. And it did all happen very fast, and they were isolating as it was happening. So they've probably been a bit nervous on that side of things. And it's been something where I guess as we look at the sort of analytics behind teams, you've seen that grow as we've gone through. We do have like settings and things that the sort of policies set up, which mean that only our older students can have their videos on during lessons, and our younger students can't. And we did that from a sort of safeguarding point of view. And it's interesting that when you put the students out into breakout rooms in the upper school, all the cameras come on, they instantly burst into life. But when you bring them back into the main room, they go quiet a little bit again. So that's a future for our school anyway, and I'm sure across the country that'll be a future.
So the students are already learning the kind of social etiquette of breakout rooms compared to being in the whole class.
Definitely.
And that just reminds me of a classroom, a normal classroom. You've got the bit where the teacher's talking, and you're really not supposed to talk at that moment, unless the teacher asks you a question. Yeah. But then you send people off into, groups and working in pairs, and that is it's much louder, it's much more noisy, and it's supposed to be. That's brilliant. And of course, the other thing to say with this, yes, students are talking to each other, yes, there's chat, but they're doing it really within a walled garden. If this was just out there in the wild west of the internet, that could be on Snapchat or some of these other social media systems, and there's really no protection, there's no monitoring of things that are said there. Whereas the conversations that happen within, certainly within the class teams, students know that teachers could see that, and they know that their names are against everything they say. And they also know, if you set the policies up right, they know that they can't just edit and delete the nasty thing they just said in the way that they might on Snapchat.
Yeah, no, I would definitely say on that one that having somebody who knows what they're doing set up your platform is a huge benefit. So what I mean by that is I do know schools who sort of set it up themselves, and then when you ask and say, oh, how's it going, they're like, oh, someone did this and someone did that, and it's like, we know across the trust, because our policies are set in the way that they should be, that those things can't happen, and that gives the staff confidence, the students confidence, and obviously the senior leadership confidence as well.
Great. And from the student point of view, it's obviously the other side of all that, but it's an easy way for students to receive announcements from their teachers. As you said, don't forget to bring your football boots tomorrow. And of course, the students can respond to that appropriately and say, oh, it's not tomorrow, it's Wednesday or whatever. Yeah. It's a safe place, as we said, and it is a social place, certainly during the lockdowns and, the live lessons. That was really, I guess, kind of a lifeline to some students socially, because otherwise they would really have struggled not talking to their friends at all. And this was now a safe place that you can have those conversations and you could still be sociable, even though you're, not really allowed out.
Yeah. That was definitely useful. We found right across the trust that assemblies and things had a lot of meaning for the students, because it was a chance to be in a year group effectively, or in their class. So assemblies became really, really important, and the students did really, really appreciate those moments of being together. And when we surveyed the students, what they said was that, I can't remember the exact figure, but a really high percentage of them said, I feel like part of the school still, which was interesting because we were about 2.5 months into not being in school at that point. So right across the trust, the students were saying, I still feel like I'm in education, and I still feel like I'm part of the trust or part of the school at this time. And that was key for them to, like you say, to have that feeling of something rather than just feeling of being lost a little bit.
That's wonderful. And just to finish off on this section, just to think about the consistent experience for students, because there's a lot of changes happening at the moment. And of course, students see change anyway as they move through the years. As you move from year 9 to year 10, you have to get to grips with Key Stage 4. consistency is very important, and it makes the students feel comfortable. And if you've got a consistent experience where you're using something like class teams to support your real classroom experiences, you've got your resources in subject sites, and they all look more or less the same. There might be some variations. There'll be the odd teacher that's added a Twitter feed to this, and the news items will be different. But essentially, they know they can go to French or science or history, and the experience that they have is going to be very similar in that space. That kind of makes it easier for the students to learn as well. So what we'd like to do now, thank you for that, Stuart. We'll move over to a demo with Lloyd, and Lloyd's going to show you just the basics of some of these things. Obviously, we've got full demos that you can watch that take a bit longer. And then we'll just have some time for questions at the end. If you do have any questions about anything that Stuart has been saying today, or anything that comes out of the demo that Lloyd does, please post those in the Q&A section.
Great, thanks, Darren. So I'll just go over quickly what we're going to cover. So I'll start by just going over some of the different types of teams that you actually can create and how you can actually create those. So that'll be staff teams where we can actually look at how you can be collaborative in those areas as teachers and store all of those resources for the long term. And then we'll have a quick look at class teams as well. So how you can actually access those resources from the class teams, and we'll look at conversations and channels, how you can post messages out to the students and have that area for communication. And then just have a quick look at assignments as well, and how you can use those resources to have a look at how you can send out work to the students if that's homework through assignments. So I'll just share my screen and then I'll get straight into the demo. So can you see that okay?
I can't see that at the moment, Lloyd.
There we go. I'll just press OK to share my screen.
There we go. We can see that.
Great stuff. So I'll just go straight into teams then. So we can see at the moment we've got all of the teams that this teacher account's got access to. So I'll just start by showing you how you can actually set up some teams and the different types that you get as well. So at the top here we've got to create a team, and then this will take me to a page where I can just create a new team from this point, and it'll show me some of the different templates and what we can actually set up and go through. So we've got a create team option, and here we've got a couple of different class team templates. We've got class teams, so this would be where you could have discussions with students for group projects, assignments as well, and class notebooks are all part of that class team. So we'll get to that later on. And the other one that I'm going to mention is the staff teams area. So this is really talking about where you can store all of your resources, maybe even have meetings in these areas and give staff an area for each subject maybe, and how you can actually set that up for the long term. So if I was to create a new staff team, I could give this quick title, and then I can press next, and this is where I can actually add some members into this team as well. And just to quickly show you that, add somebody into the team, and then my class team, my staff team will actually spin up into here. So the reason why to mention about the actual staff team is because you get a couple more different options within here. So you've got the post areas where you can send out information if that's a meeting, or even just send in links to resources as well. And then you have the files tab. So this is where you can store all of those documents, create folders, and create an area for all those resources for the long term. So I'll upload some in a second. And the other one to mention is the staff notebook. So this is a key feature as well about the staff teams, is where you can actually create a staff notebook area. And I can set this up from here, so then all of the teachers for this subject or for whichever team I've set up can access the same notebook to maybe work on meetings together or for CPD time as well. So just to show you one that I've set up before, just for time, if I go to the staff notebook here, I'll show you what this will look like. So the main benefit is each member of the team will actually get their own section as well. So we can see here I've got the account that I added in, and then they've got different sections for professional development, however you want to actually set this up. So it makes it really easy to keep all of your notes in one place as well as resources as well. And then from the point of view as maybe a head of department or senior leader, you do have a content library as well where you can store, if that's policies, dates and deadlines. So another way to, organise your department and use, the advantage and benefits of teams and class notebooks together.
So it seems to me like this would be a great way to do CPD, because you've got, the head of department, in this case music, you might have another couple of teachers in that department. Those teachers would have their own section where they could make notes about their progress and do that nice reflective practice stuff. And as the head of department, that person would be the owner of this team. Therefore, they could see those sections and review those notes either away from those teachers or with them as part of an appraisal.
Yep. So they could, as you rightly said, as you're an owner of the team, you can come in here, see all of the members' sections and here review any of the work. And the key benefit is really everything's set up automatically. So as soon as you've created the team, set up that notebook, it'll spin up all of the sections for each member, so you don't have to worry about creating sections or messing with the permissions as well.
I guess it's a little bit like the class team where you have the class notebook, isn't it? Except instead of it being students getting their own section with the teacher leaping across them, you've got the head of department leaping across individual sections for staff.
Exactly, yeah. It could be used in the same way as the class teams. You can even use this area to maybe even store some class notebook pages that would be shared out for the subject as well. So again, you could dip into this area, use those pages, and then bring them into your class notebooks. So if that's heavily used within the school, it's another area you can use that for resources as well.
Right, because I guess at the moment you've got a lot of individual teachers, and it's a bit like we talked about with Stuart, people having documents in their own silos. We might find there's a lot of class teams where teachers have built up these class notebooks with lots of content and pages and sections. And where does that come from? Does every teacher create their own? So this idea that you've got a centralized staff team with a staff notebook, and you could put all your kind of templates for your notebook stuff in here, and then when you want to move that across into your class team, because maybe you're thinking about assigning that page through an assignment, you copy it out of here.
Yep, yeah, you could quite easily do that. You could just move that across, and then again, that's saving time, and then teachers aren't duplicating work as well, which is going to be really helpful. And they would already be using this staff team for documents as well, so it makes sense for them to use that if they're using class teams, for that same for the same concepts of saving time and reusing resources and sharing documents.
And with assignments, if you're in a class team and you're creating an assignment, and instead of pulling that the resource that you want to use from OneDrive or somewhere, would you be able to find the files that you drop into this kind of team?
So yeah, anything that I would actually drop into here. So I'm just going to create a couple of documents, just move some across, and I'll show you an example of exactly that. So if I just upload a couple of resources, when I come to the class teams in a few minutes, I'll show you how you can actually reach in from a class team and access these shared resources. So that way you could even, attach a document that maybe even another teacher has uploaded, and you could just reuse that content. So you're using each other's documents, you're sharing those files, which again is going to be much better for the long term. So what we've got here is just a couple of resources, a plot summary and lesson 1 worksheets. I'll show exactly how you can find those documents when we come to create an assignment. So if I
suppose you can scale this up as well, because this is just the music team for a single school. But I presume, like we spoke to Stuart about, you could create a Fallibroome music subject team, and that would be kind of a swap shop for all the good resources.
Yep, exactly. If you wanted to set it up like that, you could have a team across the full tenancy, which could involve all of the teachers and have a central area across the trust, which you could have that same concept of sharing and working on resources to then use within, you know, different types of teams, such as the class teams areas. So just talking about the posts then, and again, how we can use those documents. So it was talking at the start just about how, you know, posts have been really useful, especially with students, and maybe reducing emails as well. So just a few examples of how you can do this. So if I mention the team within here, this will send out a notification to all of the members of this music staff for this case. And we can use the announcements options. You know, you have this within the class teams as well, where you can, you know, jazz up these messages, make them stand out for the students or for anyone within the team when you're sending out the messages. And what's really useful as well, talking about being more efficient with how you can work and saving time again, you can actually just use this attachment option and just browse through any of the files within this team. And it's best practice to do it this way, because then you're reusing those same documents and you've got one version of the truth. So that way everyone's just using those same files and they're not downloading their own version, which they're going to be working on, maybe on their own laptop, for example, or their own OneDrive. When this way everyone's going to be working on those same resources, which is, you know, makes it much easier for the future and actually, you know, engaging with that collaborative, you know, style of work within the teams. So if I was just to send up this lesson 1 characters, for example, to maybe all the other teachers in the music staff, I could share a link to that exact file, which then we could quite easily share from and collaborate from that further.
And that file there, Lloyd, that's not just a snapshot, is it? Like if you click on that and you open it, you know, like with an email, you open an email and then you start working on a Word document, but you've forgotten to save it somewhere. So you're just working on the temp copy and then you close it down and you go, where's that document gone? It's not like that, is it? This is actually working on the document collaboratively. So you go in, make some changes, somebody else goes to the same place, makes some changes, and all that work comes together in kind of a permanent file.
Yep, so you can even do this straight within Teams. If I go straight into the Word document I've just shared out, you know, we don't have to go into the desktop app. You can do that if you do want to for some more features, but you know, if we're just actually editing this quickly, we put some ideas down, the main uses of, you know, working within Word, you can quite easily do this within Teams. And if I was to come in here in another account, so if I was another member of staff, I go into the music staff area, can see the notification straight to that lesson 1 characters. I can open this up and then we can work in that co-authoring way and actually work on this at the same time. And we can see the other teacher, we've got John here, who's just writing a new title, and we can see exactly where he is on the page as well. So we're not editing the same, you know, same section. And even if we just want to jump on a call or just work on this together, you know, you can do that within a couple of minutes.
Oh, that's great. There are a few things cooler than co-authoring like that.
Yeah, and even when you come back to a document, it'll show you any changes. So you've got the catch-up option, which is really good, even if you're not working in real time. Again, it's still actually, you know, co-authoring and working on the same file, but you can easily see what somebody's changed on a document, which is really useful just to, you know, catch up and you know, see what they've done. So if I now go back to my other account, I'll just go into the class teams now. So now we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'll try and get into the last bit of the demo. So that was looking at the subject areas where you can store resources. So now I'm just going to drop into a class team and show you how these teams can actually link up, so you can use those same resources year on year, if that's creating assignments or just dropping a link to a file, you know, to the students for within the class. So within this class team, we've got a lot of activity that's already going on. So we've got some announcement examples. We've got the praise tool as well. So talking about the communication features as we did before. But this time at the top, we've actually got this resources English tab. And this is something that we add in as our product, but it will actually link to those staff teams that I've just created. So this is an English one for this case, but you could quite easily add a tab to the music staff area, so then you can access those resources without actually being in that teams. At the moment, we're in the class team area, but I can still access all of those resources, across English, where all of the other English teachers are working and collaborating on documents.
So Lloyd, when it comes to the next academic year and they get their new set of class teams created, can they still use those central resource areas?
Yes, so when the new class teams are set up, we'll just add a link straight to those resource areas. So the resources will just follow, the other classes basically, so they're not just attached into that particular year. So you can reuse the same documents. They'll just be there once the new class teams are set up.
Great.
So some of the last things to cover as well, talking about the resources. So this, I could quite easily, grab a link to it here, maybe post about it within the conversations area so the students can easily access that. But also another way that you can use these resources, if I go to assignments and we're using this is maybe a homework tool to send out, formal work for the students. When I create a new assignment in here, I can again link to those documents and even just pick which ones I want from those central areas. So again, we're just within a couple of clicks, makes it really easy to access those files. So once I'm attaching a resource in here, the way that I can actually access them, if I go to Teams, I'll then be able to see all of the teams I'm a member of, and I'll be able to access either English subject, or going back to my example from earlier on, we've got the music staff area, and within there I can see those documents that I uploaded a few minutes ago. So if I wanted to attach the lesson 1 worksheet, I could attach that to the assignment, and then I can even select some of the options further within assignments if I want students to just read the worksheet or attach their own copy. So once this is sent out, every student will have their own copy of that document, which is a really quick way to send out work to students and then be able to actually monitor that and mark it within the same tool as well in assignments.
Great. So as a teacher, I don't need to upload a particular resource into my class to use it, or put it in my OneDrive, copy it into there. I can just reach into that kind of permanent area that I made, the music staff site or the English staff site.
Exactly, and you can do that year on year, so for the next academic year, again, you can just use those same resources and choose any of the documents that are within that subject. So if another teacher has uploaded some, or just any of the resources that you've got within there, you can select from and choose then to send out as an assignment.
So strategically, I guess that supports those things we were talking about, saving teacher time, because you're not having to spend your whole life uploading documents around and copying them around to different places or creating different documents. And the quality should also go up, because all the resources that are being used within assignments should come from places where head of department or senior leaders should have an overview of those documents.
Great. Thank you for that demo, Lloyd. That was really good. We don't have much time for anything else in terms of demos, but we have got lots of videos on our YouTube page. So I've just put up on the screen our contact details. If you have got a camera phone, if you point your camera at those QR codes, it will link you straight into our Twitter page. Sign up for our newsletter, lots of tips and guides if you sign up for that. Our YouTube channel, which has got lots of free guides and mini tips and podcasts. And we've also got our private Facebook group for educators who can share their best practices. I'm just going to go quickly to the questions, because I know we've almost reached the end of our time. So we've got a few questions, and I'm just going to start off with a question for Stuart. So we've had a question come in. How do you deal with students who don't have a device or lack good internet connectivity? What's sort of the trust approach in terms of that situation?
The advice has been, or what we've done is we've managed to use the sort of analytics of Office 365 to work out who's using what type of device. So we put out a Microsoft form initially, and we knew from the responses of that of who had a limited number of devices, and we knew across the trust as well where there were issues of device previous. We've been fortunate across the trust that we picked up quite a few of the DFE laptops and managed to get them out to students. We've also, across some of the schools in the trust, bought into like additional laptops from our catch-up funding and used the funding that way to support our students long term with catching up. So we've used that as an initial way. What we've then done is we had some of the dongles came through from DFE as well. We've managed to distribute them to the places that are needed. And then also we managed to find some, I think it was Vodafone specific SIM cards or data packs that we managed to download, and again we were able to spread them out as well. So what we think we've done is managed to cover across the trust and fill the gaps really, and it's quite interesting really, because if you wouldn't have had a pandemic, we wouldn't necessarily have thought about that too much. And what I mean by that is we've got students at Eaton Bank who are in year 12 and 13 who said, I've only really got my phone, or we've only got a shared device. And because of our way that we've always been working with our homework policy and whatever, they've had 5 or 6 years within school where they've had to struggle through that, but it was sort of accepted that that was the way it was. So what we've managed to do across the trust is spread the devices out in a way that means that we cover those students. And the analytics, like I say, means that you can have a look at who's logging in only on an iPad, for example, or only logging in on an Android device or on an iOS non-desktop, and therefore you can specifically be like, right, well, this kid needs something, and that's how we've managed to do it.
Great. So hopefully it's going to solve that problem in the future that people just sort of ignored, because I guess it didn't stop anything from working. It was just something that was inconvenient. Yeah. So yeah, that's really interesting.
My next meeting now after this one is to speak to the person in charge of disadvantaged students, and is to start redistributing our laptops now that we've had sort of everybody come back into school. So it's now an ongoing process that gets reviewed every stage. Great.
So we've got a couple more questions. One of these I've tried to answer in the chat. So can you share these documents that you were showing, Lloyd, over different tenants? Now I'm not sure what your advice is, Darren, but my reply back to that was files ideally stored in that central location, so departments can reuse them in any assignments, and they might even differentiate those assignments with those same resources. So it's best to keep them in that central resource area. But actually sharing across different tenants is actually not that easy, and I would probably recommend a single tenant for the trust.
Yeah.
I guess that's our advice, is to have those central tenancies where you can. I know it's not always easy to do and set up, but it definitely does improve that collaboration between the different schools.
Yeah, so single tenants for all your schools is definitely the best way to go. I know, Stuart, you mentioned the fact you're trying to move all your schools into the same domain, technically speaking, and that is a very good idea in itself, because that has lots of advantages. You don't necessarily need to do that, though. It's absolutely possible for 50 different schools who each are on their own domain to all be connected up to the single tenant. You don't have to move them together in the domains first. You can just connect them up. That used to be very, very difficult, because you then had to do some horrible thing with a VPN and a WAN to kind of pour everything through the same funnel so they could all go up together. You don't need to do that anymore. It's now possible to do that in a very kind of disaggregated way. So actually fairly easy now to take 50 different schools and make sure that the users from those different schools are all synced into the same tenant. So that might be worth looking at. If you were thinking of having a big IT project that's going to take 3 years to move all the schools and the teachers and students into one big domain, and then kind of do the Office 365 thing, it might be an idea to just do the tenant thing first and then move the domains afterwards, if it's going to slow you down. If you can't do any of that, there are still things you can do. Of course, you can choose within your organization to allow external sharing of documents. So you could go in and you could take a single document, a single PowerPoint or whatever, and get a sharing link to that you can literally give to anybody in the world, never mind a specific school, and they'd be able to have read access to that document. So you might be able to do it in a very kind of piecemeal way, saying, yeah, we're going to share this document and this document and this document. But that's of course not as good as, you know, students just being able to go in and find the stuff themselves. And there are ways as well, you can kind of share an entire site with people. That is possible, but it's very, very complicated to set up. There's a lot of technical things to get in place before doing that. So if you can possibly move everyone into the same tenant, that's by far the best thing to do.
So final question, I'll answer this really quickly. Can you send out work for them to work on collaboratively? So in Teams assignments, at the moment, there's only the ability to assign to individuals. I do believe it's on the roadmap to have group assignments, but there are other ways you could do that. So things we haven't had a chance to look at today, such as private channels, that if you're working collaboratively in the classroom, then there's the breakout rooms as well. We've got some videos on those, and I'll post those in the messages at the end. So we've just come to the end of our time now, but if anyone has any other questions, feel free to send us an email, post to us on Twitter. You can get in contact with us on all those different channels. But thank you very much for joining us, Stuart. Thank you for spending the hour talking to us.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Lloyd and Darren, for the questions and take us through the demos. I think that's going to be really useful to everybody who watches this presentation. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tony.
Bye.
Thanks,
All.
bye.